There are moments in life when the world feels impossibly loud. Opinions collide like storms, beliefs harden into armor, and every conversation seems to be a battlefield of certainties. In this noise, we're told that the mind changes through force, through sharper arguments, stronger logic, louder voices. But listen closely. Beneath the chaos, there is another sound. A softer one. A sound many people overlook. It is the moment someone looks at you, without judgment. The pause before a stranger holds the door. The warmth in a friend's voice when they say, "I'm here." Kindness, quiet, unassuming, almost invisible, has the power to slip past every defense we build. While doctrine battles doctrine, kindness moves like water, shaping the stones we thought would never change. And when it reaches us, something subtle happens. Not a dramatic explosion, not a sudden enlightenment, but a thawing, a loosening, a softening of the inner walls we thought were permanent. In a world obsessed with being right, perhaps the real transformation begins with something far simpler. A gesture, a tone, a moment of unexpected grace. And in that gentle silence, something shifts. So what if the strongest force in the human mind isn't conviction, but compassion? Walk through any city today and you'll notice something strange. People move fast, faster than ever, yet their eyes seem tired, unfocused, almost hollow. Everyone is connected to everything, all the time, yet somehow more alone than any generation before. This is the modern paradox. We know more, argue more, defend more, yet understand less. Screens glow like tiny suns in our hands. Notifications fire like sparks. Opinions flood every corner of the digital world, sharp, polished, and ready for conflict. We can access the world's knowledge instantly, but wisdom feels more distant than ever. We can send our voices across oceans, but can barely hear the person sitting beside us. And in this paradox, a strange belief has formed. People change when they're confronted. But confrontation rarely opens hearts. It closes them. It makes the walls higher, thicker, colder. The more we push, the more others retreat into the safety of their own certainty. The stronger the doctrine, the stronger the resistance. You can see it everywhere. Families divided not by distance, but by pride. Friendships strained, not by actions, but by assumptions. Communities splitting apart because listening has become a forgotten art. And yet, beneath all this tension, people carry wounds they never show. Private fears, quiet insecurities, invisible battles that no doctrine can reach. We rarely fight out of strength. Most of the time, we fight out of pain. This is the part of the paradox we rarely acknowledge. People don't change because someone wins an argument. People change because someone sees them. Because someone meets their fear with patience, their confusion with empathy, their defensiveness with gentleness. And yet, this gentleness is exactly what the modern world discourages. We reward the loudest voices, the strongest takes, the sharpest comebacks. We chase attention, not connection. We chase victory, not understanding. Noise replaces silence. Speed replaces presence. Winning replaces healing. And slowly, almost unnoticed, we forget something ancient. The human mind softens only when it feels safe, only when it feels respected, only when it feels held. Think of the last time someone showed you genuine kindness. Not the kind performed for approval, but the quiet kind, the sincere kind. Didn't it stay with you longer than any argument? Didn't it shift something inside you, even if only a few degrees? The modern paradox is this. In an age overflowing with information, the thing that transforms us most is something we cannot download: compassion. And if that's true, if the gentle touch matters more than the perfect doctrine, then perhaps we've been trying to change each other in all the wrong ways. The world shouts for us to be louder, but maybe the answer has always been softer. What deeper truth could we uncover if we dared to look beneath the noise? If you look closely at human history, across cultures, across centuries, a pattern emerges. Empires rise through power. Movements grow through doctrine. But human hearts transform through something far more delicate. Not force, not ideology, not the sharp edges of certainty. Hearts change through kindness. It sounds simple, too simple for a world as complex as ours. But simplicity is often the final language of truth. Think of the moments that shaped who you are. Not the lectures, not the rules, not the people insisting they knew what was best for you, but the small, unexpected gestures that arrived when you least deserved them, or when you needed them most. A teacher who stayed after class not to correct you, but to encourage you. A stranger who saw your struggle and chose to help. A friend who forgave you quietly, without making a speech about forgiveness. These moments didn't shout. They didn't preach. They didn't demand anything from you. Yet they changed you. Because kindness does what doctrine cannot. It speaks to the parts of us untouched by argument. Doctrine tries to change the mind by force. Kindness invites the mind to open on its own. Doctrine demands alignment. Kindness inspires alignment. Doctrine divides. Kindness dissolves the divisions. The difference is subtle, but it is everything. The invisible doorway. Inside every person, no matter how hardened or hostile, there is an invisible doorway. It cannot be unlocked from the outside. It cannot be forced, argued, or pried open. The only key that works is trust. And trust is built through one currency: kindness. Think of it like this. The human mind is not a fortress to be conquered. It is a garden to be nurtured. If you plant seeds with aggression, they will not grow. If you try to force the soil open, it resists. But if you approach with gentleness, with sunlight, with water, with patience, something begins to bloom. We forget this because we look at change as something dramatic, immediate, heroic. But the truth is quieter. Change begins the moment someone feels safe enough to soften. Why kindness works when logic fails. Logic speaks to what we know. Kindness speaks to what we feel. Logic says, here are the facts. Kindness says, here's my hand. Logic informs. Kindness transforms. Why? Because the human nervous system responds to tone before it responds to words. We decide whether to trust someone long before we decide whether to agree with them. Before the mind even begins to evaluate content, the heart asks a different question. Do I feel threatened, or do I feel seen? If the answer is threatened, the mind locks shut. If the answer is seen, the mind begins to listen. This is the secret no doctrine wants to admit. The delivery matters more than the message. You can speak the purest truth in the harshest tone, and it will be rejected. You can speak a simple truth in a gentle tone, and it may take root forever. The softening effect. Imagine two people arguing. Each one raises their voice a little higher. Each one sharpens their words a little more, until eventually they're no longer speaking to each other. They're speaking over each other. But imagine if one of them did something unexpected. Imagine if, in the middle of the argument, they softened their voice, lowered their shoulders, said, "I understand why this matters to you." The atmosphere changes instantly. The emotional temperature drops. The mind that was ready to defend suddenly becomes ready to hear, not because the words were brilliant, but because the heart sensed safety. And in that safety, the human mind becomes willing, even eager, to shift. Kindness as a mirror. Kindness doesn't force self-reflection. It invites it. When someone shows you compassion in a moment you expected criticism, you can't help but look inward. It feels like a mirror being placed in front of your spirit, but without judgment, just clarity. It whispers, you can be gentler with yourself too. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to change. Kindness doesn't break the ego. It persuades it to loosen its grip. Doctrine says, here is the right way. Kindness asks, what is hurting inside you? Doctrine says, listen to me. Kindness says, I see you. And being seen is what transforms us. The most radical truth. Here is the paradox at the center of all this. Kindness is both the softest and the strongest force in the human world. Soft, because it feels gentle. Strong, because it moves through barriers nothing else can cross. You cannot force someone to open their heart. You cannot force someone to evolve. You cannot force someone to understand you. But you can make them feel safe enough to choose it for themselves. Kindness is not weakness. It is strategic compassion. It is emotional intelligence. It is the quiet courage to meet hardness with softness, and to trust that softness will do its work, slowly, invisibly, powerfully. In a world that prizes control, kindness is the ultimate surrender, a willingness to influence without forcing, to guide without pushing, to lead without dominating. The sentence that holds it all. If everything in this world were stripped down to its most elemental, most consistent truth, it might be this: people change most when they feel loved, not when they feel lectured. And perhaps that is why kindness has shaped more human lives than any doctrine ever written. So if compassion is the real catalyst, what story can show us its power? There was once a small mountain village where winters were long and unforgiving. Snow would fall in thick, relentless sheets, covering rooftops, silencing roads, and isolating every home. In that village lived an old woodcarver named Arun, a quiet man, gentle-eyed, known for speaking little and listening much. Not far from him lived a young man named Lian. Lian was bright, articulate, fiercely intelligent, but also fiercely proud. He loved debating. He loved proving himself right. He loved the power that came from having the sharpest mind in the room. To Lian, doctrine was everything. Every belief could be argued, defended, sharpened like a blade. And he used that blade often. He cut down ideas, cut down people, cut down any voice that failed to match his certainty. Even his friends began to avoid him, but he didn't notice. Or perhaps he didn't care. What bothered him most was Arun, the old woodcarver. Arun never argued, never challenged, never corrected. He simply smiled, listened, nodded quietly, and returned to his carving. To Leanne, this silence felt like a provocation. How could someone choose gentleness when the world demanded strength? How could someone hold no doctrine when everyone else fought to defend theirs? One winter morning, driven by a mix of frustration and curiosity, Leanne marched into Arun's workshop. The door creaked open, releasing a breath of cedar and warm smoke. Shavings of wood curled across the floor like fallen petals. Arun sat near the window, carving a simple figurine, a bird with unfolding wings. "You waste your wisdom," Leanne said without greeting. "You say nothing, teach nothing, challenge nothing. Silence helps no one." Arun looked up, eyes soft, and simply motioned for him to sit. Leanne stayed standing. "You could correct so many people," he continued. "You could guide them. Why do you stay quiet?" Arun studied him for a moment, long enough that Leanne began to feel irritated, almost embarrassed. Finally, the old man pointed to the small bird in his hand. "Do you know how wood learns its shape?" Arun asked. Leanne frowned. "By cutting it, obviously." Arun shook his head gently. "Cutting forces, carving invites." He handed Leanne a block of unshaped wood and a carving knife. "Try." Leanne scoffed, but he tried. He pressed the blade firmly, carving as one would argue, with force, speed, certainty. Within seconds, the wood cracked loudly, splitting into two uneven pieces. Arun didn't scold him, didn't lecture him, didn't say he was wrong. He simply took another block, placed it in Leanne's hands, and whispered, "Slowly." This time, Leanne tried again, slower, softer. He let the knife glide instead of pressing. He let the wood respond instead of resisting it. He followed its grain rather than fighting it. For the first time, the wood didn't break. A shape began to emerge, uneven, imperfect, but alive. Arun smiled. When you force the wood, it protects itself by breaking. When you guide it gently, it reveals what it can become. The workshop fell silent. Outside, snow tapped softly against the window. Inside, a truth Leanne had resisted all his life began to thaw. Arun continued, "People are the same. If you try to change someone by cutting them, they crack, they close, they fracture. But when you approach with patience, with warmth, with kindness, you carve without wounding." For the first time, Leanne felt the weight of his own years of sharpness. The friendships broken. The conversations turned into battles. The walls people built around themselves whenever he entered the room. He thought knowledge gave him power, but perhaps kindness was the deeper wisdom he had never learned. Arun placed the carved bird in Leanne's hands. "I shaped this not with strength," he said softly, "but with respect for what the wood already held inside." Leanne looked at the bird, delicate, open-winged, light enough to perch on a fingertip, a symbol of transformation, a reminder that softness achieves what force cannot. As he walked home through the falling snow, the world felt different, quieter, wider, as if something inside him had shifted. Not because Arun taught him a doctrine, but because Arun showed him a kindness that held no judgment. A kindness that invited him to see himself newly. And in that gentle invitation, Leanne finally began to change. In your own life, what would soften if you stopped cutting and began carving. When we talk about change, we often imagine something dramatic, an awakening, a breakthrough, a sudden burst of clarity. But real change, the kind that reshapes the inner landscape, is almost always quieter. It happens the way winter turns to spring, slowly, invisibly, then all at once. Leanne didn't transform overnight. He didn't leave Arun's workshop and instantly become gentle. But something inside him had softened. A crack in the armor, a space where light could finally enter. Over the following weeks, he began to notice things he had never noticed before. How people flinched slightly when he raised his voice. How conversations tensed whenever he entered the room. How his need to be right had slowly pushed away the very people he hoped would admire him. These realizations didn't come with self-blame. They came with a strange, unfamiliar warmth, because for the first time, he understood what kindness felt like. He had been carved, not cut, guided, not corrected, seen, not judged. And once you've experienced this kind of gentleness, something in you refuses to go back to the old way of living. The shift within. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Leanne visited a friend he had argued with months earlier, a friend he had wounded with sharp words and sharper pride. The apology he offered wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. His voice trembled, his eyes lowered. But it was sincere, and sincerity has a power doctrine can only dream of. His friend didn't lecture him, didn't punish him, didn't bring up the past to make a point. He simply placed a hand on Leanne's shoulder and said, "I'm glad you're here." Just 5 words. 5 quiet, unassuming words. But they melted something that argument never could. In that moment, Leanne finally understood. Connection is built not by winning, but by softening. Kindness echoes. That winter, the village changed, not dramatically, not publicly, but subtly. Leanne listened more. He judged less. He asked questions instead of forming conclusions. People noticed. People responded. Where once there was tension, there was warmth. Where once there were walls, there were doors. Where once conversation felt like a battlefield, it now felt like a bridge. He discovered that kindness doesn't just change the receiver, it changes the giver even more. Because every gentle act we offer to another person becomes a gentle act toward ourselves. Every softening outward becomes a softening inward. Every compassionate moment toward someone else becomes a healing of our own unseen wounds. Return to the opening paradox. Remember the opening thought, that the world believes minds change through doctrine, through the sharpness of ideas, through the strength of conviction. But Leanne's journey revealed a truth that echoes quietly through human history. People change most when they feel safe enough to change. No argument can create that safety. No doctrine can demand it. Only kindness builds the doorway where transformation enters. And in that realization, in that returning to the quiet force beneath all human growth, we arrive at the emotional center of this story, and perhaps of our own lives, that no matter how complicated the world becomes, no matter how many opinions clash, no matter how many certainties divide us, the thing that truly shifts the human mind is simple, ancient, universal. The warmth of being treated with gentleness, the grace of being understood, the medicine of being seen without judgment. Because when kindness touches us, something opens, and once opened, we never close quite the same way again. So what might begin to transform in your life if you let kindness lead? In the quiet that follows all change, something tender becomes visible, a truth we've always known but often forget. Human beings do not evolve through pressure. We evolve through invitation, not through the weight of someone else's convictions, but through the warmth of their compassion, not through being told what to believe, but through being shown what it feels like to be understood. Kindness is not a decoration on the edges of life. It is the architecture of transformation itself. So as this story settles in you, let there be a moment, just a moment, where you let everything slow down. Breathe once, gently. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your thoughts rest. And ask yourself quietly, where in my life am I cutting when I could be carving? Where am I pushing when I could be softening? Where am I trying to change others instead of trying to understand them? You don't need to become a different person overnight. You don't need to abandon your beliefs or your strength. You only need to choose one small act of gentleness today, right now, and let it ripple outward. Because every time you choose kindness over certainty, the world changes a little. Every time you soften instead of sharpen, someone breathes easier. Every time you make another person feel safe, the doorway of transformation opens. And if enough of us choose this, the world won't need more doctrine. It will need only this simple truth. Kindness is the quiet force that remakes the human mind.